Hi there. This is Maureen Cressy Callahan at the University of Connecticut Archives and Special Collections. And I'm going to be doing a quick demo about how to use spreadsheets to create archival objects and then import them back into ArchivesSpace. So a lot of what I'm talking about is going to be specialized for our context, but I think this might be a useful demo to others. So I hope it's helpful. Okay, so in ArchiveSpace, one way to think about it is that the views that we have of all of our holdings is kept in a database in a series of tables. So you can think of this as just like there are a bunch of spreadsheets behind ArchiveSpace where the data is stored. And one feature that's available, and this might actually be with a plugin, is this load via spreadsheet. And so so the idea here is that you have a spreadsheet template, you put in all of the information that you would otherwise put in fields just like this. And then when you upload it, it presents in the way that you expect to see objects in ArchivesSpace. It creates these objects and then you can view them normally. Doing this work in a spreadsheet has a few advantages. One is that it's really easy to see everything that you're looking at side by side. You don't have to sort of like go from record to record to record to see what's going on. It's really easy to notice patterns if you see data in spreadsheets as a series of rows and a series of columns. And in our case, we think that this is probably going to be really useful because it's really much more helpful for reviewing student work. It might be a little bit easier for students to even start doing this data entry in a spreadsheet. They don't have to learn all of the ins and outs in the different fields of ArchivesSpace in the same way. And also, we're able to see at a glance the kind of data that they put in and notice patterns or successes or mistakes as they come. So that's a little bit of background about why you might do this. So, how do you get this spreadsheet? The easiest way is in ArchiveSpace. If you go under here, you can go to these bulk import templates. And this gives you a lot of actually different spreadsheets usually that you can use to upload data. So in addition to this bulk import AO XLSX, which is the Excel spreadsheet, it can do digital objects and locations and subjects and all sorts of good stuff. So if you wanted this, you would just go ahead and download it. So that's what we've done here. And what you end up with is a really fat spreadsheet because each ArchiveSpace archival object can have a lot of fields. And that is not super easy for a student to make sense of. So what I've done for our UConn Tech context is I've just hidden a lot of columns and made this template. And the other thing I've done is I've done some color coding so that any column that's in white is something that we should reasonably expect a student to fill in, and actually anything in white is required. Anything that's in yellow is something that a student would fill in, but it's optional based on whether or not you need it. And I'll talk about that in a moment when we go through these different fields. And anything in gray is something that should be filled in by an archivist, mostly because it's kind of weird data that the student wouldn't have access to. Also, it tends to be the same data over and over. So you can do things like, pull down in Excel to get the same data going. So at UConn, this template inventory is in our SharePoint site. You're going to want to map that to your OneDrive so that you're dealing with it on the file system and not in SharePoint because, gosh, SharePoint is hard to work with. But in any case, it's here in this folder. Call it desk projects because this is work that student will probably be doing at the desk, although it doesn't have to be at the desk. Um, Here's our template inventory. Do not edit. And so what you'll do is you'll open that template inventory, you'll go to File, and you go to Save As, and you'll save it as really whatever you want. This is sort of a temporary file. It's useful to maybe have the call number or the collection name or just something that you know will be useful. Let's go ahead and stick it into this inventory spot file just so everyone knows where it is. Your students know where it is if they need to get to it. So I've made a demo inventory and it looks like this. And so let's pretend that my student had done this. And we started by sitting down with the boxes. And I made really sure that I went through all of these instructions with them about what kind of information we should expect to have in a title field and also what some of these more tricky fields might be. And again, students are only need to do the fields that are in white or in yellow. So we started out by explaining that this will be a whole series of correspondence. So maybe we did that together. We called it correspondence. And the level we gave it is series. Um, and then this element here in column H is probably going to be the trickiest to be able to explain to a student. So you might just want to set it up for them beforehand. But this has to do with where something is in the hierarchy. So for instance, let me give you a good example of this. Let's pull up a collection here. Okay. So in this collection, if I were importing this series one published book, that would probably be hierarchy one. 49th Magician would be hierarchy two, and Dummy would be hierarchy three. It just sort of goes, we see the metaphor here of it being indented, but the idea is that it's showing what the relationship is from one to another. 40, so series one would be hierarchy one, 49th Magician would be hierarchy one, Dickfoot and the Shark, I'm sorry, 49th Magician would be hierarchy two, Dickfoot and the Shark would also be hierarchy two. 49th Magician and Dickfoot and the Shark are siblings of one another. And then going down, Dummies would be hierarchy three. So this is a way of showing sort of what parent-child relationships are and what sibling relationships are. And again, this is not super easy to explain at first blush unless students are really familiar with this. So you might just want to get them set up with this to know that they start with a hierarchy one. And then, if you're sitting them down and they're just doing a full folder inventory, you might want to pre-fill that these are all twos. So you would do that by like putting this in, sort of highlight these, take this and pull it down. And so they already know that these are all twos and you know that they're all going to be files. You might want to pull this down as well, just so that that's pre-filled for them. Okay, so they've put in the title, they've put in the hierarchical relationship, they've put in the level. Um, then they've put in the dates when they do the file inventories. A good rule of thumb is if you have a folder, spend no more than 20 or 30 seconds flipping through it, getting a sense of dates and date ranges, and then put them in. If they really feel like they're making, usually those, just your sense of it is fine. Like, we don't have to go crazy about this. If they really feel like they're making a wild guess, it's great to put in approximate here in the date certainty field. Again, this is yellow because it's not required. They need to put in approximate, not approximately. This is a controlled list that's going into ArchivesSpace, so ArchivesSpace won't accept it unless it says approximate. Otherwise, leave it blank. Um, then, okay, so they have their title, they have their level, they have their date. Then scrolling over a little bit, they have their container indicator. So we need to know what container type it is. This is the thing that circulates, right? It's the thing that we page from the shelf. So it'll almost always be a box. It could be a volume, could be an oversized folder, but it'll usually be a box and then the box number there. Um, ArchiveSpace, when it imports this, if you put in a box number that already exists, it'll actually merge it in. So if you have things that, you have a half full box one and you have materials that you're putting at the end of box one and you want them to inventory them, you can enter box one and it'll just add it to box one, which is really great. Otherwise, if you put in a new indicator, it'll create a new top container. And then also optional are the child container types. If it can be really useful to have folder numbers, so give it the type of folder and then the folder numbers. One, two, this one is family correspondence, which is numbers 3 through 5. That's great. That's a great way of doing aggregate description, and then folder 6. And then finally, one of the note types that I made available in our template is scope and contents notes. So in this case, the file name was family correspondence, and you might just want to give a little bit more context, or you might have a good student who knows how to do this, and she might say, okay, looking through this, it looks like these 3 folders of correspondence mostly include letters from this woman's mother, Paula, but scattered correspondence from other family members is present. That's a great scope and contents note, and it makes it so that you don't need to inventory every folder. You certainly don't need to inventory every item. Of course, the magic of aggregate description is that if you find researchers keep coming back and want to know more information about family correspondence, we can always go back and do break out each of those folders or even do item level description if that's necessary. But starting in aggregate and writing good scope and contents note is usually a great place to start. Okay, so scrolling through, it looks like those are all the columns that were either required or optional for students. And so let's say they've put this all together, they send it to you. You're gonna review their work. Make sure that everything looks good, make sure it's in sentence case, make sure that abbreviations are spelled out, make sure that just like if you don't know what this is and you look at it, it's pretty clear what's going on. A good guidance to give students is that it's great to start by transcribing folder titles. That tells you a lot. But if you look at that transcription and you're not sure what it means, it's good to just like open the folder, give it a little bit more explanation as necessary. Okay, so you've reviewed their work, you feel good about it. If there are a lot of mistakes or a lot of things that need more work, send it back to the student. Have them augment this. You can do that as many times as you need. And then it's time to sort of fill this in so that we can upload it. So this column C, this first column, is the EAD ID. ArchivesSpace needs this so that it knows exactly which collection to be adding these objects to. So if you go back into your collection, you can find the EAD by going up to the collection level. Then you scroll down and you can see here the EAD ID. So you can just copy that and then paste that in here and just make sure that that's the same for each of these. Um, Next, you go into the published true and false. There might be some things you don't want published. That's great, but false. Otherwise, put true for everything. Um, for date types, anything that's a range, you should leave blank because it defaults to inclusive. If it's a single date, you're going to want to write in single. Um, you can, if you want, you can do some sort of like fancy filtering in Excel to search for the hyphen to indicate a range and everything that's not that. You'll put single date in, just a suggestion. Um, and then we're going to go over to our containers. So every container needs a type and an indicator, which should have been filled in by the student, and then also needs an instance type. I have a long rant about how this is nothing. This is not DAX. This is not EAD. This should not have been included. This is not a way to describe materials. So just put in mixed materials. Um, just check their work. If you're doing series level description, you don't need to put in the box number. Anything that has a container indicator is something that can be requested in Aeon. So, you might not want someone to be able to request the whole series. Similarly, this is sort of the category. Down here was award correspondence. There wasn't actually a file named award correspondence. It's just a category that the student or the archivist created. So that's why it doesn't have a box number. And then the last thing to check is that if there is a scope and contents note, you're going to want to make sure to give it this publish indicator, whether or not you want to publish it. I assume you usually do, but if you don't, you would switch this to false. Okay, so your spreadsheet is looking really good. Oh, one last thing to check is that if you have any of the sort of this trailing data where you were just kind of setting it up, but it's not a real record, just make sure you go ahead and delete that. Because otherwise ArchivesSpace will be like, hey, you have this record you want me to input, but it doesn't have all the data fields. What do you want me to do? And the answer is, you can just delete the stuff that you don't want. Okay, so going back into ArchivesSpace, we're back at this collection that we know we want to upload to. Let's click on edit. And you're going to see this button that says load via spreadsheet. So you click on that and you want to select the file that you intend to load. Mine is called demo inventory. And then a good place to start is by clicking this button that says only validate. So what this does is it makes ArchivesSpace go through the process of what it would be like to import these records and making sure all the data is valid, but doesn't actually do that, which is really great because if it will go ahead and import invalid stuff or stuff with problems, and that's annoying because you just have to delete it and re-import it. So let's start with only validate. And then, yeah, it is archival objects that we're importing and import from spreadsheet. Okay, so it has my bulk import job and this sort of, so this is exactly the thing that we were talking about. I think what had happened here is because I had put in these rows, I had put in that silly text. It looks like there is not data present. It actually just skipped those, so that would be fine. But what I'll do is I'll go back to this, find these rows, and delete rows. Great. Okay. So what I would do then is, since I made that fix, close this. It'll load via spreadsheet. Select file. Donor inventory MCC. Open. If I had validation errors, I'd probably do the only validate again. But in this case, I'm feeling pretty confident that I fixed whatever's problem. And import from spreadsheet. Great. Okay. It's still giving me that problem because I think Excel registered those as being real rows. But I can go back and I know that the last archival object I wanted was Caldecott Award. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. And then it tells me that it's there. Let's refresh the page. And let's see what these look like. So what happened is it imported all of those rows. It put them at the end of the existing collection. And this should all look pretty familiar. So it starts with how it corresponds 2001 to 2019 and its level equals series. Let's take a look at our demo. Yep, that looks pretty familiar. Um, let's see, going further down, I can see that since I had nested Caldecott Award under awards correspondence, there it is. Great. Oh, let's look at my scope and content note that I had in family correspondence. There it is. It's published. The text looks familiar. And then let's take a look at my app container view. Great. And it shows me all of the records that this is linked to. So again, I would keep taking a look. If anything was weird or bad, I'd probably, you could, if it's just a couple things, you can fix it in here. If it's more systematic, I'd probably go to the spreadsheet to fix it. And then you can keep doing this until it looks right. And then at UConn, we would go into our production system and go through the same steps to upload it, and it would be ready to go. So I hope that this is useful to you. And I hope that this is a useful tool.